All right, everyone. Today you're going to be learning about phenomenal intervention, the playbook. I am your presenter, Jeremiah Short. I'm a reading and writing interventionist at Fraser Elementary and Cypher ISD. I'm entering my 9th year in education. I spent, I would say, roughly five and a half years in the classroom before I moved into this role. And during this time, I have created this routine. So you see, there's a pretty little cover. I'm even enamored with it myself. So before we kind of get started, I want to kind of give the background of phenomenal intervention, the playbook. It actually started in a year where I only taught about half of the year. And I tutored a friend of mine's daughter. She was behind, she was in 2nd grade, so she was reading at about probably a B or a C level. So what I decided to do, instead of jumping right into comprehension, trying to teach comprehension skills, I decided to start at the very beginning. We started with letters, then letter sounds, and then we moved on to short vowels, and then we moved on to digraphs and blends, then CVCE. So I moved along a certain progression. Then at a certain point, I started mixing in the comprehension, teaching retelling, problem solution, and moving on to character traits and mixing it all together. And eventually we made it kind of toward the end. I don't think she was quite at grade level as far as reading at an M by the time I got done intervening with her at the end of that year. But at the same time, she started doing very well on the test, making 80s, doing very well. And actually, I ended up tutoring her a little bit in math because she got so far ahead in reading, and she's doing well now. And that took place over a 5 to 6 month period. I had a progression, a lesson plan for what I was going to do for her. So it's kind of the origins of it. And then you move on to this past school year. I actually taught the first half of last school year while also being an interventionist. And then toward the middle of the year, I moved full time into the interventionist role. And I was like, hey, I need something. I'm so used to being over a classroom, being a classroom teacher. So I decided to create an intervention structure, more formalize it, I guess you would say, and create a structure that you can use for interventions. So this is said intervention. So you're going to see 5 different progressions. And it was 4 when I originally created it. But that was me being a novice, never really having worked with kids that are RR or beginning readers or can't read to some. So I realized that needed to be its own separate progression. So you're gonna, and to explain what cycles are, cycles is the amount of time during that particular period. So if I say 2 cycles, you might as well say like 8 weeks. So cycles are normally gonna be about 4 weeks. So RR to A, that will take about 2 cycles. A to D, which is the period you would see normally in kindergarten, that would take 3 cycles. D to J, which would take 3 cycles. And J to M, I feel like most kids, when you get J to M, you're not going to start with them at their range. At the J, they're normally going to be somewhere in the D to J level. So they would be, and y'all can ask questions at any time after say I finish a slide. So D to J and J to M. And then M to T, that's what you're going to see from 3rd through 5th grade. And most times when you get kids in an M, they're probably going to be in 4th or 5th grade if you start with them at their range. So you would take them through a certain set of activities during that time period. So you see progressions. So let's start with RR to A. I'm into football, I love football, so I gave everything kind of a name. So RR to A is warm-ups, the warm-ups. So the materials you're going to need, you're going to need letter activities. And again, I call them the warm-ups because it's kind of getting them ready to actually intervene with. So you're gonna need letter activities, letter sound activities, blending activities, and segmenting. And for those that may not know what that is, blending is like, so if you got the word cat, you'd be like k, at, t, cat. So it's like putting it together, and segmenting is just the actual sounds, like cat, and then you'd be like k, at, and t. That's just knowing what the sounds are. And then skills the kids need to master, it matches up with activities, letters, letter sounds, blending, segments, and they need to master those skills during that time period, or at least be fairly proficient before you can move them on to the next stage. Traditionally, if you're going to get kids RR to A, you're probably going to be moving them A to D or D to J at some point. So that's just kind of to get them started if they are already RR. Your next progression is A to D, which is the air raid. And my football team, Mississippi State, that's we run. It's kind of a precision system. It's kind of like Novocaine. You keep doing it, eventually it'll work. So A to D is really just about doing softer skills, but you have to do them proficiently, and you have to keep doing it until they get it. So you're going to need letter sound activities because you're going to have to make sure they continue to try to master that skill. Word study or word power lessons, which is a routine I created, which I will show you later. Excellent. I'm gonna pause real quick for the other person to join. Hello, Carissa. I'm in the middle of showing everybody the different progressions, so we're not too far in. All right.
All right.
So materials needed for A to D, you're gonna need guided reading books and then sight words. And then skills to masters, kids need to master short vowels, digraphs, blends, and connecting phonics skills to reading. So it's important. I know right now we're kind of in a science of reading, balanced literacy, kind of like war era time and literacy, but it's important that you mix both of them. So at this point, you want kids to learn those phonics skills, be able to do decodable text and all that, which we'll get to. But at the same time, they need to be able to connect those to their reading. Something I saw this year, you can teach them the skills, but when it gets to actually reading the book, they need to be able to look at those books and attack the words as they're reading. They need to know left to right correspondence. They need to be able to know those things. So at this stage, you don't necessarily reading for comprehension. You just need them to learn how to actually read the words on the page. They're going to be things like long vowels. You're going to see some diphthongs even at this stage, but it's not going to be too heavy and it's fairly predictable. So moving on, the next stage is D to J, which is hurry up. For those who've never taught first grade, kids have to move 6 levels in the first grade, which is D to J. So that's why I call it the hurry up, because they're gonna move faster. Because a lot of the skills are pretty simple at this stage. It's just they have to learn how to be more proficient at reading and be more fluent. So at this stage, you're gonna need word power lessons, guided reading books, sight words, high frequency words, fluency passages. So they just build that word knowledge. And you will start getting more into comprehension. They need to master CBCE, which some call silent E, long vowels, control R, and retelling. I don't think it's necessary to master problem solution, because at this stage, it's still not heavy comprehension, and the problem solution is pretty clear at this stage. It's not really that complicated. The progression, next progression is J to M. This is what you're gonna see in second grade. I call this the pro style, because you have to be able to do a multitude of things. So the materials needed will be word power lessons. Again, what I'm gonna show you later, fluency passages. This is a stage where you really, and I'll pause a little bit here. J to M, this is a critical stage. You're gonna need probably more than 30 minutes. You're gonna need 40. So if you're a classroom teacher, that's gonna look a little different, but you're gonna need about 40 minutes, because this is the stage where kids really, all those skills that you need to read, all of those kind of get mixed at this stage. The second grade, and that's why it's so hard for kids to move, because this is where learning to read and balanced literacy and all those skills kind of come together. So you're gonna need word power lessons or word study lessons, just depending on what you do. You're gonna need those particular lessons. You need guided reading books, comprehension passages, high frequency words. The key skills for them to master this stage is diphthongs, inflectional endings, which is like ED, ES, S, ING. They're gonna need, and if you teach kids that are ESLs or bilinguals, and the term now is multilingual, they're gonna struggle sometimes with those and the pronunciation of those. So you really wanna kind of be attuned to that and really paying attention to that as you're working through that. I find diphthongs to be a little easier than long vowels, because it's just a little more clear. They're gonna need to master problem solution, and they're gonna need to be able to master analyzing characters. You will teach them other skills like inferencing and theme, but at the same time, they don't necessarily have to master those skills to make it past the stage, although it'd be good to kind of teach it to them. All right, and then we have our final stage. This is a lot more going on. It's the M to T is the RPO, because there's a lot going on, but a lot of it depends in that system, the run pass option in football, a lot is on the quarterback. So the same is here with the teacher at this stage, because a lot of it is on teaching this comprehension, and you will have to be very skilled at teaching it. So the materials needed, you're gonna need vocab trailer lessons or vocabulary lessons on whatever you have available to you. For fluency, you're gonna wanna mix it up, because this is a longer stage and kids can get bored, so don't do the same thing. You're gonna need something for rate, which is the speed or how fast they read, or better word probably be prosody. Expression, you might need poems. That's a good little way of practicing fluency in a fun way. Reader's theater, which is the same way it can be fun. You're gonna need guided reading books, which at this stage you're only gonna use for a limited amount of time. Comprehension passages and complex text, which is basic stuff. text is very hard. Skills to master, morphology. This is going to be key here. It's not about phonics. It's about key, more final, stable, prefixes, suffixes, Greek and Latin roots, and figurative language. This is going to be very key toward them making it to Q, R, S, T, those 4th and 5th grade reading levels. So kids are going to have to master 3rd level comprehension, which is like analyzing characters and inferencing. Those are the 3rd level skills. And then also 4th level comprehension, author's purpose and themes. So I'll pull back a little bit here and kind of explain the levels of comprehension. So your 1st level of comprehension, I'm very big on Bloom, and I feel it's very applicable to intervention or small groups, whatever you decide to do. Your 1st level is going to be retelling, just being able to recall and tell you what happened in the story. 2nd level will be like problem solution, the main idea, just telling you, comprehending the story, telling you the main idea of what the story is about. 3rd level, that is where you get to interpreting. So analyzing characters, and lower level inferencing, because higher level inferencing is really a 4th level skill. So that's what you're really going to see at that 3rd level. And then your 4th level is where you get into author's craft, author's purpose and theme, which falls under the same thing, because theme is still the lesson learned, what the author wants to teach you, but those are all kind of the same skill. So it's really that high level of thinking and author's craft. And you see that with poetry as well, or with point of view. So those are the skills they have to master at this stage. And then at this stage, also kids are gonna have to learn how to annotate and analyze text. All right, so we're about to move into the plays or the skills you would use. Does anybody have any questions at this point? We'll have a time where we have a Q&A, but does anybody have any questions about the progressions?
Can you go over what the, you were saying how the M to T was a certain grade, the A to D was a certain grade. Can you go over which ones belong to which grade level again? Can you say that again?
Sure. So I'll go back to the slide. So RR to A, this is typically, messed up. So this is typically what you're gonna see really when kids are in pre-K or maybe at the beginning to middle of kindergarten. Some saying that the whole kindergarten. So RR is kind of like they're beginning readers, or they can't read yet, just to be honest with you. So you want to kind of move them toward that H stage, which is prepare them to learn short vowels. So you will see this RR to A in pre-K.
Okay.
You're gonna see A to D, which it typically takes kids. Also, it takes them about 9 weeks most time to move a level. That's typical in the earlier stages, and I'll get to the M to T and how long it normally takes them on certain stages. So say moving from A to B, that typically takes 9 weeks. And essentially the system I'm proposing is one where you might can cut that in half or a third almost. So A to D, that's what kids are supposed to move in kindergarten, from A to D, or C is acceptable. In 1st grade, kids need to move D to J. So they're gonna, it's projected they're supposed to move every 6 weeks. And the reason for that is a lot of the skills are kind of simplistic during that stage. Like you normally have to learn phonics patterns, so they're all kind of similar. At that point, it's just building the kids' stamina. So they will move a little faster. So once they start learning the funny skill, they'll move. And J to M, that's what you're gonna see in 2nd grade. And really, some would say N. Some maybe say you want kids to be at an N, maybe by the end of 2nd. But J to M, what I found, and even when I taught 2nd grade, that was kind of a frustrating thing. A teammate told me they move a little slower during this stage. But one thing I kind of discovered, the reason for that is that they have to know so many skills. That's where skill reading kind of comes in. They need to be able to have good word recognition skills, which is their ability to look at a word and go cat or male. They need to be able to say it automatically. They need
to practicing their word fluency. Like when they reading, they should be able to read a certain amount of words within a certain amount of time frame, and have to say those words without stumbling or happening. Yeah, I remember that. Yep, I get it.
So your fluency has to build, your comprehension, all those skills, and then building their vocabulary. Most time kids cater to their vocabulary isn't gonna be as, you'll find though, if the kids' vocabulary is strong, they'll definitely move faster to J through M. That's where you have to start building their vocabulary. So all the skills come together. They don't need to know higher level comprehension, but they need to start learning comprehension skills. And then here I'll explain M to T. So in 3rd grade, kids need to move from an N to a level P. One thing I found through studying is that from N to P, they actually can move pretty fast during the stage, but a lot of third graders sometimes come in with a lot of gaps that sometimes aren't filled. So sometimes it seems like they don't move, and really they should. If you have adequately prepared them for the third grade, they really should start moving at that stage. Because if kids are at an M and an N, there's no excuse they shouldn't start moving fast. Now, moving from a P to a Q, that's going to be a much bigger jump, because that's moving from third to fourth. So there's going to be much more complex text. So sometimes kids may stall a little bit there. So M to T, I'm not M to T, P to Q, there might be a slow stall, a little bit of a stall. And then you have Q to R, which is normally it's going to, once you start getting to that, it's going to take kids 12 weeks on average, they say, for them to move that level. And then the levels after that, they will take a little longer, because they have to get used to longer text and more complex text and more figurative language. So they move a little slower. All right. So let's move back to the plays. All right. So the first play, as I call sports, of course, is phonological awareness. I didn't put this on here, but it's 6 different things encompassed. It's called more of an umbrella term, because you'll see things like alliteration, phoneme awareness, which we're going to touch on, which is technically under rhyming. Those are the things that kind of house phonological awareness. But I put some sample activities, which I put in my book here, but which I'm working on converting into an ebook literally as we speak, with people who do all that. Anyway, so some sample activities you'll have is decoding drills, tap it out, rhyming, alliteration, onset rhyme. So to explain, so decoding drills would be as simple as you get 20, say, CBCE words, and you'll have kids, when you're reviewing, the kids will go through and practice saying those words. It seems simple, but it works. So at that point, a lot of times what I do, I'll go through the words with the kids. So you might go cake, cute, bake. You just say all the words, and then what I have the kids go back and do is read the words, silently, and then mark the words that they know and don't know. Seems like the simplest thing in the world, but if you do it for 4 to 5 minutes as a warm-up, the kids' word recognition skills will go up, and then you'll see it as they read. So it seems like a simple thing to do, but essentially all you're doing is reviewing the previously taught skills. Tap it out, as simple as, I'm trying to think of a bigger word. So uniform, you could be like, uniform. It's some sense tapping out the syllables. Or it could be a simple word that's a short vowel, like duh, guh, dog, just simple like that. Rhyming is pretty self-explanatory, so you want kids to be able to rhyme words. So rhyming activities are good for phonological awareness. Alliteration, which is words beginning with, say, A or B or something like that. And then onset rhyme would be like bake, like buh, ache, bake. So that's what onset rhyme is. Phoneme awareness. So this is kind of it's under phonological awareness. I kept it the same symbol. So it seems simple, but one of the best things you can do is practice the ABC song. A, B, C, D. It sounds corny, but if you say do it on transitions or something like that, that's a good way for kids to remember their letters. I feel if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, sometimes we want to do all these new and innovative things, but sometimes the easiest thing you can do is keep it simple. Phoneme awareness, also have blending, segmenting, phoneme manipulation, and word change. So I'm gonna pause there for a minute. So phoneme manipulation, I'm saying this, I don't know how I'm butchering this word, manipulation, that encompasses phoneme addition, phoneme deletion, and phoneme substitution. So that would be, addition would be like if you had the word cap, and then you add an L. So you'd be like, the word is cap, and I'm gonna add L after C or something like that. Then you say the word is clap now. That would be like you teaching them to add a letter. Deletion would be as simple as you say, A, the word is clap. I'm gonna delete the L or the C. So if you delete the C, it becomes lap. If you delete the L, it becomes cap. So it really helps as the kids start to read. You'll see kids actually start to be able to do that. So they need to be able to say, for example, if the word is cap and then they say bap, they need to be able, and that's where phoneme substitution comes in. So you can substitute words. Kids being able to do things like that, they'll be able to start doing it in their reading. They'll be able to start, okay, I don't know this word 100%, but I know if I take this out and put this in, or I delete this, this is how I pronounce this word. Word change is also another one that's really good. It's what I like to do with word change is like mix in phoneme addition, deletion, and substitution all together. And even though I didn't do it as much this year, ask the kids, hey, Are you doing phoneme addition? Are you doing substitution? Are you doing deletion? So that's something I actually want to drive home a little bit more this year. So you kind of get the kids to understanding what's going on with the individual phonemes. Phonics. So people say phonics, and I know even on a lot of the teacher tests, people get confused. The best way to kind of substitute phonics is to say spelling. That's pretty, or letter sound correspondence. And one thing you'll start to be able to see, like say if you give an assessment at the end of the week on spelling and phonological awareness, if the kid can spell the word, I can guarantee you they will never, ever, ever not be able to pronounce it. I've never seen it. It's normally automatic. So some ways to practice phonics is a word sort. That's like the most research-based thing. I don't care what system you use, what spelling, anything, you're gonna see word sorts in it because it works. Guided spelling, I call it guided spelling. This is something I do with my word power system, is I might call a word and I let kids write it on a whiteboard, and you can go by and kind of start seeing the errors the kids are making. Are they hearing the sound? Sometimes they might be hearing the sound, they just not writing it right. You kind of can start telling, like, so that's where you check for things like dyslexia and things like that. So are they hearing the sounds? But they may not spell it right, but you can tell they're probably hearing the sounds, they're just not spelling it correctly. So that's what you kind of can start seeing. What I do when I do guided spelling, I may help them spell a couple words first, then they spell some words, and I also do something what you call a spell and draw. So that's something that I do. Elkin boxes, those are really good too, especially once you're in them lower stages, especially when you're talking about spelling digraphs. Kids have a hard time. So if you say chat, the kids have a hard time. They might write cat because they don't hear all the sounds. So Elkin boxes are good for that, separating the individual sounds. Decodable text, that's like the big one. That's almost like the biggest battle right now with science of reading and balanced literacy. I don't feel that it's something that you should use as your primary reading material, but I use it as part of my cycle when it comes to teaching word power, like on my third day, and even as reinforcing material. But I don't feel like it should be your primary reading material. But kids can read a word that have a bunch of short I words in it, and then I like them to underline it, the word, and then sometimes you can have like lower level questions, but it's good for them to practice reading that word in context. And analyzing spelling would be something as simple as putting a bunch of the words, not a bunch of words, asking a question and asking them to analyze the words for which one is spelled correctly. Something as simple as that. So it's not too complicated. All right, the play, vocabulary. This is where I kind of can show you my word power system. So say for example, so I build everything I do according to Bloom's taxonomy. I'm going to do it in an easier fashion so it can come across a little easier. Okay. So the first stage of Bloom's is knowledge. So the first day you kind of just introduce them to the words. One thing I've gotten to where I start to do is kind of like chant the sound first. So that would be the first thing I would do. And then we would say the words. So say, for example, the word is race. I would like, the word is, I call it word power. I'm like, the word is race. What's the word? And the kids will say race. So one of the things I might do is as I say the word, I might be like race. Then you like nice, same cycle. Page, you might flip your hand. Hide, I might literally tell the kids to go hide under the table. So it kind of reinforcing that vocabulary while at the same time teaching them what the word means. I might ask the kids, what is a cake? You have the word face, I have them touch their face. It's just simple things like that you can do. So this is where also you can I normally don't do this as much because it takes too much time, but I go through and then intentionally teach them the words as well. One thing research says that if kids learn words better when they use them in context, if you teach them what the word means and then they use it, it has a higher effect size. So I like to do both. This is a cool little, and also normally here I'll have them underline the silent E. So say A and E, I normally have the kids underline it and use voices and all that cool stuff. Anyway, so to teach vocabulary, I use something called vocabulary trailers. It's actually not something I came up with myself. Something that Joanne Billingsley, a great expert in vocabulary, came up with, and she told me I can use for my system. But this is good for getting the kids to talk. So say, for example, you see the picture there, you give them a prompt, and then I would be like, in this picture. Normally in the classroom, I would have them turn and talk to each other, and then they'll shout. So they'd be like, in this picture, the boy got hit in the face, and then kids might add, but he was playing soccer. And a way to embed comprehension in it, I'll be like, how is the kid feeling? How do you think he's feeling? How do you know that? So what's your evidence? There's a good way also of kind of teaching kids how to analyze text features as well. So I like to mix all those in. So let's move on to day 2. So this is where, and this would be like more onset rhyme. So this would be tap it out like ace, race, age, page. So something as simple as that, and I have the kids do it. And sometimes I have them come up and do it as well in the place of the teacher. Again, sorts, silent EA or long A and long I. So I'll have them sort the words. And then this is something pretty cool too. Have them draw a picture to show the word. And then I have them write a sentence. Most of the time they'll write a sentence with all of them, but they can write a sentence with one of the words and picture it as an extension. Most of the time they're able to do it though, because they normally do it pretty quick. All right, so the third day, you would use, this is just more for reading and illustrate, but this is where they would read a text, underline the words, and then like on this activity, this is some, I guess, supplemental material I use, they would read it and then draw a picture. Kids like to draw pictures, so that's what I like to do. And also on the third day, this is where I normally do phoneme. I call it phenomenal manipulation. This is where I do phoneme addition, deletion, and all that. It normally takes like a couple minutes, so it's pretty quick. Okay, so I normally do either phenomenal analysis or I do conversations on day 4. I've started doing phenomenal analysis, which I'll show you in a minute, on day 4. But at the same time, this is something I typically do in the classroom. So I normally have the kids in stations. They go around for 3 to 4 minutes, and then they answer the prompts, and then we share out. So for example, here, one of the words is wise. So the kids station 1, they would write, tell me about a person that you know is wise. So they get to talk it out and write a paragraph with it. So use the picture and word to write a paragraph. So the word is grade, so like the teacher grading the test, and then they write a paragraph. Here, this is where they get a chance to share their opinion. Which do you like best, vanilla or chocolate cake? And then and what I started doing this year, I was like literally let them debate it with another classmate, have some kids come up to the front and they debate each other. Then here, the words are smile and arrive, use the words and picture to write a paragraph. And I normally use other stuff too, because I normally don't use more than one of these prompts. And then on the last day, I typically just do an assessment for spelling. I normally do all 15 words, even the challenge words. And then here, they can synthesize and write a story. Normally I do like for the intervention kids, I have them say each word so I can kind of track if they're mastering the skill. So that's word power. So now we'll get to phenomenal analysis. It's a little shorter. I'll just show one just for time's sake. So say for example here, so I embed everything with science of reading. So the kids will say the word like mad, then we'll sign it out together like mad. They'll spell it, they can color it and do all that. Then I've gotten to where I just define it for them just for time's sake. And then we might do it with expression. So I added different little things there like, are you mad? Yes, I'm mad. And then 3, don't be mad. So just teaching them to say things with a different tone. And then I actually supposed to have a picture here. I don't know what happened there. But then you'd be like, tell me why she's mad. So it's supposed to be a picture there, but the kids would tell me why the particular person in the picture is mad. So now we move on to fluency. This is a key one. I learned a lot just from a guy named, I actually had a chance to interview him, Tim Rosinski. He's one of the leading experts on fluency. Sample activities are repeated reading. So that's something simple as the kid reading the same passage. I like to use timers. Kids love timers. It's like a competition thing. Core reading, that's like them reading at the same time you're reading something. That's a good way of modeling fluency. Fluency expression, that's like reading with expression and voices and things like that, which they'll start saying in their head. Read is theater. Think of it as like drama or something like that, or which it is. And then fluency and comprehension, which is something I kind of touched on last year. I want to do more this year, where the kids, you will mix in that fluency and say they have to answer a question every day after reading the passage for that particular day. And then we'll move on to comprehension, which is the last play. It's 2 others, but I kind of just stuck to these 5, which would be writing and background knowledge, but we're gonna just keep it simple. So some simple activities are targeted guided reading. You can teach 2nd and 4th level comprehension. Bloom's book study, closed reading, text analysis. So I'll pause here because I'm like, wonder what some of these things are. So targeted guided reading, there's no reinventing the wheel. Guided reading is what it is. But what I do with a guided reading is I break it down to individual skills. And I guess in a typical small group or guided reading structure, this would be strategy teaching, but I try not to call it that. So say, for example, the skill you're teaching that week is problem solution, which is one of the things I definitely do with guided reading. Excuse me, got to update. So the first day I would just pre-teach vocabulary intentionally and incidentally. So I have them use vocab trailers and teach them what the word means from that particular book that they might need to know. The second day I do fluency. So we read the book together. That's a good time to do running records. So if you're keeping up with particular students and if their ability to read, or are they using their skills, that's a good time to take a running record to see if they're mastering certain skills. So that's all we focus on the second day. The third day, we just do comprehension. And we go through, and I will say, especially if it's problem solution, I will model how you find the setting, then the problem, then you look for the events, the climax, then the solution. I model how you go through that. And then you could decide to extend it for a fourth day, but most time on the fourth day, I would go and give them, like, say, I use RAS Kids, so I would give them maybe an assessment on that particular book. And it's normally pretty accurate. Like if you'll be amazed, you think, oh, they read the book, you read it with them, and then they'll make 5 out of 5, and they won't. So it's like you'll start seeing. So I kind of explained a little bit what second and fourth level comprehension was. Bloom's book study. So what I do there is say you would use a guided reading book or a picture book, whatever you want to call. And a lot of times, like I said, I use RAS Kids for this as well. This would be a time where you would reinforce, if you've taught all the skills they need to know, you would reinforce setting, you would reinforce problem solution, you would reinforce characters, inferencing, theme. They will all be mixed in as you're going through this book. Now, of course, they all wouldn't be like sequentially in order, but it just depended on that part of the book, like character feelings or inferencing or something like that. They will all be in different parts of the book. And then at the end, maybe on a separate day, you will ask them an evaluate and synthesize question, which, for example, you might ask them, was the main character a good person or a good friend? Synthesize might be, hey, how would you have solved the problem? That might be a synthesized question. Or did you like the book? Well, that's a evaluate question. So you might ask them something like that. Closed reading, that's where you teach kids to go back and reread certain text, parts of the text or a paragraph, and then, ask them a question from it. Text analysis is something I came up with myself. It's a 4-day process. The first day is really, I call it pre-teach and preview. You pre-teach phonological awareness, phonics, give them a phonics focus, key vocabulary. Normally I want to give them a fluency focus per se. Sometimes I do. And then you might pre-teach core skills, or you might show them, you either activate background knowledge, like if it's something they might know about, but if they don't know something about it. So say if it's on the Civil War, you would show a video on the Civil War. So that's normally what I do. And I mix fiction and nonfiction things at this time. All right, so now we get to the juicy stuff. Case studies or case studying. So here you have a third grader. Her, at the time, the beginning of the intervention, she could decode most of it, 75%, which is pretty good, of third grade words. Her encoding was 25%, so she struggled a little bit with letter sound correspondence, and her fluency was 32. And she's a third grader, so that's not grade level. And her reading level was an H. So when I received this student, at the end of the first 9 weeks, she had undeveloped strengths, I like to use that word, positive terms, and letter sound correspondence, fluency, and comprehension. To intervene, I started with CVCE and moved to our more advanced phonics patterns. She displayed consistency of mastery of phonics skills. Eventually, basic comprehension was added to the cycle. Further progress, I taught more advanced comprehension skills, inferencing, theme, point of view. Closing out the cycle, I conducted text analysis, which accelerated growth. By the end, and she really hated that. She didn't like text analysis is very hard. By the end of the intervention period, 39 weeks, she displayed strength in more advanced decoding skills and basic comprehension. I don't know what in the life of me happened to some of my stuff, because I know I tested them on decoding, it kind of just disappeared out of nowhere, but it's whatever. So at the end of it, her decoding, she was pretty proficient in most third grade words, 95%, and her fluency was at an 80. I felt like if I had her all the way to the end of the year, she probably would have been right at 100. So she still needs a little work there. And her reading level was an O. So the intervention weeks was 20, because I had her toward the end of the first 9 weeks, and then we had tests and stuff, so I threw it off as well. Second 9 weeks and third 9 weeks, and fourth 9 weeks, we had test prep and things like that. So the typical progression weeks to move from the H to O would be 57 weeks. I was able to do it in 20.
Damn.
So she wasn't the only one. I'm about to show you. So her year's growth was 2.85. And so further discussion, the student was ready to return to Tier 1 instruction, but needs monitoring for fluency and potential income. So those are two things she probably needs to work on. All right, so now I'll show you my growth tracker from the year. So this is where I kind of can get into more how most of the kids did, or all the kids did. So let me a second, I gotta find a way to minimize. All right, so this is where some of my primary kids I work with. Primarily, I'm actually a 3 to 5 interventions, but I did work with some primary students. So I have the names blacked out, obviously. So the kids at the top here were first graders. They all started at RR. These kids were bilingual students, so it's kind of like they probably weren't ready for intervention. So it kind of was like one of those, probably wouldn't be accurate data either way. So this particular student, he struggled a lot. He couldn't blend, he couldn't take me, he couldn't do anything when I first started working with him. So I was able to get him to a B. So he didn't show as much growth, and he was about a year behind age-wise. So he was able to grow 1.28. So not probably the growth I love, but he still made a lot of growth. This particular student, she started a little slow, but eventually she really started to accelerate once I started connecting those phonics to her reading, and she grew 2.57 years. This student here, she grew from an F to an L. This student from a G to an M and an H to an L. So this student grew 1.71. This one grew 2.625, 2.81, and 1.875. So all in all, this student probably started off as the strongest, but this student right here, she really, oh my goodness, she started off with a lot more inferential knowledge. So once we got into the comprehension stuff, she learned her phonics skills, she accelerated. So she finished the year low, actually doing like better than her classmates and stuff in regular class. Third grade, this was the primary grade I worked with. These top students, this was like a 6 to 8 week period that I intervened with these students. So because most of them were pretty much close to level, but I saw they were moving slowly, so I asked, could I work with them so we can go ahead and move them. This student moved from an M to an N in that time period. So the normal growth weeks 9, I intervened for 6 weeks. He grew 1.5. This student went from an N to a P. So they grew 3 years. Into O, 1.5, and then these two students grew from an N to a P, which was 3 years growth. So these next group of students, which I think was the students I actually taught in the first semester, but I still intervened with them. And I actually was able to work with them toward the end of the year. End up growing 2.7 here, L to an O, I to N 2.1. And that student legitimately was struggling at the beginning of the year. So that student made a lot of growth. 1.35 and 1.22. That was a group where I probably made some mistakes and probably wasn't strong with them on that phonological awareness piece. So, or that word recognition piece, so they didn't grow as much. This is the group I'm most proud of here. This one student here, I only had her for part of the year. She went from a G to an L, and she grew 3.21 years. And she actually was a SPED student as well, so she made significant growth. This student grew 2.32. 1 second. Okay, and 2.4 and 2.85. And then down here, these students actually used them as case studies together. Both of these students grew from an I to a P, and a P is where you're supposed to be at the end of the 3rd grade. So they were at grade level by the time I got done with them. So I was very proud of that. 4th grade, this is the group I didn't have as much. I have as many 4th grade students the whole year. But as you can see here, the speed of time, overall, they grew 2.1 or 2.2 years. And then my 5th graders that I work with, they averaged 2.09 years growth, 2.1 years growth. So using this system, they all showed significant growth. So I want to show you the data before we got to the next point. So we're at the Q&A. So what questions do you have at this juncture?
With the growth period, you had them from the first 9 weeks. So when you first got them, those were the ones that were hey, first 9 weeks where these kids are already struggling. I need you to step in and guide them throughout the rest of the year. So you were basically like coaching them all year, or did you just coach them to a certain point of the year?
Well, and the reason intervention actually stopped is because we started doing test prep. So there was some students that kind of fell off just because so I was giving like the whole fourth grade, most of the fourth grade, what we call bubble kids. Those are kids that are kind of on the bubble for passing what we call the STAR test here in Texas. Excuse me. So that's the only reason the intervention stopped at that point, but most of them were pretty much at level at that point. So if we didn't stop it, it probably would have stopped anyway. So that was the reason that it stopped at that point. And my viewpoint of intervention is something that you don't do the whole year, because I feel with this system, because I'm actually pushing to start interventions a lot sooner, because like I said, I got those kids at the end of the first 9 weeks, maybe like on week 7 or week 6. Well, actually, I think it was week 7. I wanted to start the second week because I feel like if I was able to have that success last year, those kids would be out of intervention by the beginning of the second semester or somewhere toward the middle of the third 9 weeks. So that's kind of my goal, is to get them out of intervention that quick as well, especially that I have a whole year to just lock in on it.
It's amazing that you were able to bring them. I mean, even the one that didn't get exactly to where you wanted him to get, you still brought him pretty far to go from a B to where he ended up being. That's not too far, but he still moved though. So that means you were still doing a good job.
Yeah, and I know that, and that's so sad, that pressure you put on yourself. But there's a lot of factors that sometimes go into that. I mean, you look at the overall range, but then with students like that, I would say you look at, not necessarily, I don't want to use the word failures, but you look at those students that didn't make that type of growth, and like, why didn't it happen? Sometimes it is just external factors you have no control over. But sometimes you can look, what can I do differently? And that's one of the things I'm looking at, toward this year, is because I didn't start full-time intervening until the middle of the year. So now that I have a full year, you can have a full plan of how to do it. I actually cleaned up a lot of things. I actually have my own course. I created the guide. So now I'm like, okay, this is what, I'm going to do just starting with the year. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to get this data. Because I actually didn't even start until maybe 6 days before the school year. I got hired late. So I didn't even get like a clean start. Then I was asked to teach as well. So I was teaching and doing interventions as well. So once I was able to fully lock in on interventions, I took off. So yes. So Clarissa, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions at the moment, but I know, well, I do. I know you said, are you going to have it available, your program, on Amazon?
That's the plan.
Okay.
Or it is still going to be on Amazon. I know right now I'm trying to get it converted from a regular PDF text to an ebook. So it'll be, because that's what of course you have to put onto Amazon. So that's like a really a 2-week process. I talked with the person yesterday how long it probably would take, because I still have to get it formatted. So it'll take about a week for the initial conversion, and then it takes about another week for it to list on Amazon, which they normally do it a little quicker as opposed to the other ones. So I was trying to target July 29th, but they're like, it's probably more likely August 5th. So, and then I still have the PDF. So if it's that serious, I'll just, if I feel like it's too much of a snag, if someone say wants the book, I would just I can give them the PDF myself instead of waiting for that. So like I said, push comes to shove, it'll be August 5th. But if it isn't, there's still some snafus or something, like somebody requested, I could just send them the PDF and then they could just send me the money that way. So.
All right. Well, I'm really excited about this. And like she stated earlier, just to see the amount of growth they did have, and, working with special needs population, like I would love to see that kind of growth in my students. And so I really look for, and I like how you combine the vocabulary, like giving those visuals, and really not, like you said, not taking for granted or thinking, oh, the kids already know, like taking like the way it's structured. I love the structure is really what I'm looking at. And so I'm looking forward to utilizing your program.
Thank you. And one thing I probably can show y'all too, and I'm gonna see if I can go ahead and pull it up, if it'll come up. Go at my handy dandy, because I have like a whole little folder where I have all the stuff. So let me look at the progressions. So this would probably be the one that'll help you the most because I actually will have those embedded. No, this isn't the right one. I think this might be it. No. Okay, here we go. This one look for. All right. So say for example, all right. So say this is JDM. So I created templates. So it's already done for you. So all you have to do is do it. And of course, it's drop down, so you can change the activities, and you can type in what your own or something like that. And then you would put the student's name, their projected reading level that particular week, and then where they actually are, so you can kind of contract if they're actually progressing the way you want them to progress. And then how did they master the coding that week? So say you press here, boom, it'll tell you. Or you could put, say if they mastered it all the way, it's blue. So you kind of can even look at it and track it, and it's something good to present to parent. Same with encoding, and then with comprehension as well. So it's all already done for you. And then you can adapt it and even extend however you want. Then, so say for example, if you want to move, once you move that student to M to T, it's already done for you. You might can adapt it a little bit because you already started at a J and switch some of the activities out. So the same kind of like difference. So here it's like a 1, all the skills you would need to know and is already done for you. So that would be something that I wanted to do to kind of help out teachers as well. So they wouldn't have to do that part. So 1 second, let's go back to slide. All right, so now, I think y'all already answered, but I'm all about Bloom, so evaluate. What do you think about the effectiveness of the system?
Well, the proof's in the pudding. Based on the scores that you showed us, the progression, is very effective. Mm-hmm. Even with like the student that you said, it didn't show as much growth as you wanted, they still show growth versus sometimes when working with children, we're not, just the experience I've had, I could tell that this program would be very beneficial for the kids. I did have a question, kind of going back to the previous Q&A. The reading levels, was that based on Fountas and Pinnell, or was that
yes,
the reading A through Z?
Yes, we actually use Fountas and Pinnell at my school, and we use even, okay. I think they call it the basket. So I mean, everybody has their own little thing, but I guess Fountas and Pinnell is the traditional one most people use for the reading level. So yes, one of the things I actually base most of what I do off of, though, the reading level is kind of, I feel like a shell or the surface level. I normally screen them for decoding, spelling, fluency, because that's where you really can see where their gaps are. Because you'll, so say for example, both of those students I had that moved from an I to a P, they really didn't have a lot of foundational gaps. It was just comprehension. So I just focused on comprehension with them and maybe a dab of vocabulary. But the other stuff was fine. So I really didn't even have to focus on it. So that's the thing you kind of want to do as well, because you don't want to spend time working on stuff they already good at. So it's kind of like, it's wasting minutes. All right. So, all right. Incorporation, synthesize. So I don't know if any of you be willing to share, how could you incorporate this into your classroom or your intervention? How do you feel like you can incorporate this or use it?
Me personally, I have a 14-year-old who has ADHD, and then I have also a 10-year-old. These are my real kids. I have a 14-year-old who has ADHD, and then I have a 10-year-old who isn't struggling anywhere. She actually doesn't have a struggle, but my 14-year-old who has ADHD also struggles with reading. And so it shocks me how you broke that down for the 3rd grade, because he actually, here in Ohio, he failed that Ohio reading test, that 3rd grade reading test. And I couldn't figure out exactly where he was struggling at with reading. Mm-hmm. So we ended up doing tutoring, and they told me exactly where he struggles at with reading. And it isn't so much that he can't read, it's what he's reading doesn't stick. It's like he'll read it and he'll read it very well, but when it goes to answering those questions where he has to put it in paragraphs and say, what's the main idea? What was this? What was that? He can't function really well with that. And in the third grade, on that third grade reading test, you had to be able to answer those questions thoroughly.
Yeah. One thing I found though, a lot of students like that, the key thing, if they can read the words and things like that, is normally vocabulary. Sometimes people might even go to comprehension, but with a lot of those tests, like I don't know how tests are in other states. I know for our STAR test, the words, even in the stems for the questions, are very hard. And it's really testing their ability to know synonyms and things like that. So sometimes it may not even be that they don't know the skills. Sometimes they may not know what the question means. It's not a fault on necessarily saying it's the fault of the teacher or anything like that. But I've seen where sometimes that's the issue. Kids don't even know what the STEM is. So if they don't know that, they're gonna struggle. So that's something, worth looking at as well.
Yeah.
And I love test preps. That's kind of my other little thing. So
thank you. And I mean, and me, by me being an educator, how I would incorporate this particular study into my class, I feel like that's where the small groups come in. They do a lot of small group activities, a lot of centers and stuff like that. And so just being able to pull kids aside and give them that one-on-one and, finding out where the student is, and just like you said, because you can get kids who are in kindergarten who could be reading at a, accelerated, level. And then you get kindergartners who are coming in and some of them may not even know how to read, but they are considered to be on their grade level, which is like an A. So you got some kids who start off like really, really high, and then you got some kids who start off really, really low, and then you got to figure out that medium. You got to pull the high kids. You don't really want to hold the high kids back, but at the same time, you kind of want to use them as your helpers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I found like partner reading and things like that. I know a lot of people like using that. I even was using my second grade classroom. I did have students that were, significantly ahead of the other ones. And when the other kids were working with fluency or even with their words and stuff, I would let the other kids do it. Like while I was, working with some students or something like that. If they're sitting there for 40, 50 minutes while, you're doing small groups, if you're using that small group structure, I mean, them kids not gonna sit there and read for 50 straight minutes. I know people say they want them to, but they're not.
Right.
So, we're talking in reality. I would say get the research. In reality, they're not doing it. So, because just my own little blurb. If it was something as simple as the other kids read independently for 50 minutes, and they read 20 minutes a day, they learn this many words, and they'll learn this, and why all kids can't read? That would just be my answer. My answer to that question. Like, if it's that simple, then why can't more kids read?
See, I know here in Ohio we had that was like a part of that was a part of their homework. Every night the kids had to read a book for 20 minutes. And I mean, with my son, he was he struggled with reading, and it wasn't that he couldn't read, it was just the fact that he struggled a bit with it. And so it would be like, go get the book and then I'll read it and then you tell me, you know what I mean? Like, even if we did it like that, I felt like you're still knowing he could, if I asked him the questions that they would ask like on a test, what was the story about? What was this? What was that? He would be able to tell me, but when it came time to take the test, he just could not do it. And I'm like, do you need some headphones or something? Like, I couldn't understand why he couldn't understand. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so much, things that go. It's another little thing. It's funny. I was not studying or reading research. It's actually a thing. Not even, people talk about dyslexia. There's some kids that are like hyperlexic or hyperlexia. That's what it's called. People they don't talk about it, but apparently they can be that. They can be fluent in everything, but their comprehension isn't good. So it's almost the reverse of dyslexia. So it's normally a myriad of reasons. But one thing I started, because I've had students in the past, I just couldn't get it. They just couldn't grow or something like that. But I guarantee if you start testing them or something like that, they'll be 0 or 4 on the vocabulary questions, or there's normally something that points to it, whether it's fluency, vocabulary. Of course, phonics can be one, but normally what you'll see is probably vocabulary or fluency. And then are they even being taught the comprehension skills properly? And I know sometimes it's not like you want to attack the teacher and say the teacher's doing something wrong, but like, are they, and I like using the Bloom structure because it kind of scaffolds it naturally. So you're asking them to get the main idea, but they don't even know how to look at key details yet. It's like
right. And I'm like, that's what my issue was, because I'm like, they're like, you're making excuses for him. You know, when I would go to the parent teacher conference, like I can't stand the teachers that when I go to the parent teacher conference, and I'm telling you as a mother, I know where my child struggles at, because I read, if I'm telling you, like I read to my child and my child reads to me every night, like we do the homework and I can tell you exactly where my child is struggling. But when you say I'm making excuses for my child because I'm just allowing my child to do what my child wants to do, I don't understand what you mean by that. When he does the work and he's doing the work, and I'm telling you, he literally struggles with what you're asking him to do. You as a teacher should step up and hear me as a parent and be like, oh, I hear you. This is what he needs help with. Well, let me help him in this area. But I didn't get teachers that were willing to work with me like that. So I ended up having to go to like an outside tutor to get him to at least pass the 3rd grade.
Well, and that's why I kind of, even with this guide, I kind of want to give teachers instruction on, teaching those explicit. I find a lot of teachers don't even know, you just hear guided reading, but they don't say how you're supposed to do it anyway. They just say do it, and right. I think it's not, I ain't saying it's not their fault. So of course I feel you should seek out that professional development on your own, but giving them a system or progression of how you do it. Because I feel a lot of times for reading instruction is just people, I always hear the word spiral, like you spiral it in and you spiral. I was like, no, you explicitly teach this stuff. Like, I think we need to look at it more like math teachers and go, okay, this week we're working on retelling. If they master that skill, or retelling is kind of one of the sketchy ones. I don't think they have 100% mastery, but it helps. Move on to problem solution, because if they can't comprehend it, they're not going to be able to tell you the character traits and the feelings and inferencing and all those skills. So you move them along this progression, you'll start seeing it actually works and it sticks a lot better. It's more of a math focused, mastery based concept, but especially if you're doing intervention, it's perfect, because it's, if they master those skills, you'll start seeing they'll actually be able to do it when they take those reading level tests. So I think, some of the things you might, and I'm glad you're able to share that perspective as far as from a parent standpoint. I feel like if you brought that to my attention, I was like, okay, if you struggle with main idea, hey, let's teach main idea. Because I think maybe some people take offense to that. And I think that's where we have to kind of get past and focus more on mastery, because you will know this kid is mastering this skill, they are not mastering this skill or this funding skill. And I think that's where it has to kind of move toward, because I didn't talk as much about the data piece of it, but you have to track that data piece by piece. That's why I have the templates, and you will see like it matches up. You can go back and look the weeks that a kid didn't master a particular skill, then you're 6 weeks ahead of time, like, oh, okay, they're still struggling with this. It makes sense because they didn't master it that week. So you can easily track it that way instead of just, it's good to take notes and all that cool stuff, but I feel like data is everything, especially if you're doing intervention. So anyway, so as we kind of close out, I think that's the last slide actually. To those listening and those that'll be watching it, the webinar after the fact, and those maybe watching it live, it will be made available August 5th, come heck or high water. Right now, it should be available on Amazon on August 5th. If the conversion goes through the way I want to, I still have to kind of fix a few things apparently. So if the conversion goes through, it should be available by August 5th. If not, I'll make it available as a PDF to those who might want it, because I know we're about to start a school year, so people need to be planning and getting ready. So if you would want it, I'll probably post on my page, if you want the PDF. I'm going to make it available for, $25. And one of the things I probably would eventually go back and do, I don't know if I'll be able to do it with the conversion, but I can have a PDF where it kind of links to certain parts of it, but you will be able to click and go to the templates, and there's a lot of other cool things available as well on guided reading templates, things like that. So it's going to be a lot of appendices that, will really help you be able to do your interventions. So I just want to thank those that are listening live for listening. This has been Jeremiah Short, Phenomenal Webinar for Phenomenal Intervention, the Playbook.